Country is essentially on its arse. We say a very good morning to a woman who always puts a spring in my step and my hat at a jaunty angle, the legend that is Isabel Oakeshott. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I bumped into somebody yesterday here in the Middle East who recognised me out of the blue. And I can tell you, she's a British lady who's been living in the Middle East for 20 years. And she bounded up to me, and I can tell you she was virtually in tears about the state of the UK. There are so many people all over the world who are watching what is going on with our wonderful country. And even if they are separated from our country by geography, they care deeply and they are so upset by the shambles that we are in and the decline of our country. These are people who love their country. Just because they live overseas for a period doesn't mean they have any less love for their country. And I was really taken by that. You know, I felt quite, it was almost quite awkward because she was basically crying as she met me. And I just sort of said, it is emotional, isn't it? You know, we can look at this as a political story, but it is also an emotional story for so many millions of us, because we do feel deeply patriotic and we want our country to be as great as it can be. And it is just words that I don't want to use on a morning programme. It is just, let me just call it a shambles.
Very impressive. It's really interesting. We'll strip it down, but there's something more to it as well. I love your take on this. And I'm not conspiratorial, but you can't help be conspiratorial, because I was harking back this morning to the Rotherham grooming gangs and how this government and past governments, let's just nail this, have refused to acknowledge the plight of those poor girls and have an inquiry. When you look at Epstein and you look at Mandelson and you look at dodgy emails and you look at Andrew and trade Envoy emails and you think about the Crown Princess of Denmark wrote an email to Epstein saying, I want to have your babies, and Bill Gates, one of the most successful people, allegedly caught an STD. I just bring myself to this, which is how much, and I've never been like this, Isabel, how much of our country is corrupt? How much of the establishment have covered up loads of shambles, your word, for so long? I think the British people are sort of open-mouthed and slash completely depressed about what actually the truth of our country is.
I agree with you. You know, someone messaged me yesterday and said, someone who's not in the political world, so is it the case that all the conspiracy theories are true then? And I thought, well, you know, kind of quite a lot of them seem to be at this point. You know, there is this corrupt cabal that moves in very elite circles and looks after each other. Yeah. And they abuse the institutions, our proud institutions, to that end, whether that's the police or whether that's the criminal justice system or whether that's the media, whatever it may be. But let's just sort of zoom in for a minute on the politics of this. Keir Starmer may very well resign in the next few days. If I had to put money on it, if I really had to, I would say he will resign this week. It feels to me that when you've got senior figures coming out, you know, sticking in the knife, you're saying that the PM must take responsibility. You know, they're not saying it quite so directly, but it's very clear that the wagons are circling. Look at Ange in the hairdresser. You know, that isn't
on TikTok.
Ridiculous thing. It is also so obvious that she is on manoeuvres. I don't think this is survivable for Keir Starmer. I can see the game they're playing, okay? This is what the allies of Keir Starmer are saying now. They are saying, oh, we've got to keep him in position, because if he goes, there will be a crisis in the bond markets. These financial markets, they're a kind of a daily assessment on the stability of the UK. And they're basically saying these markets will blow up if Keir Starmer resigns. And they might not actually be wrong about that. There are all sorts of financial things that could happen if the markets take fright at, for example, a power vacuum at a David Lammy interim premiership. Exactly that. The markets may take a massive terrified intake of breath.
Surely to jump in there, that's just an excuse by his allies. Prime ministers have been ousted before and the bond markets will recover. That's just them throwing what they've got left at this, isn't it? I mean,
well, precisely. That's the argument they're using.
Yeah.
They're also sort of saying, please, can we just wait until this report comes out from the Intelligence and Security Committee? That's going to take weeks. So that's otherwise known as playing for time. And finally, the most lame argument that I've seen and heard in the last 24 hours is that Keir Starmer can't resign now because of the international situation, because of Ukraine, because of Iran, because of probably Chagos as well. I mean, come on, guys. There's always wars everywhere, so that's not going to fly. I don't think he can last, even a matter of days.
I'm with you. I mean, the Mail's all over it. Labour MPs tell Keir his position is untenable. The PM's human shield has gone. Great article by Dan Hodges, page 5 of the Mail. He'll be on as well on the show. Ministers tell me it's just a matter of time before he goes too. Can I bring you to Morgan McSweeney's resignation letter, which I thought was really poignant, right? I've always believed there are moments when you must accept your responsibility and step aside for the bigger cause. And the question I put this morning was, well, if the man who gave you the advice says it was wrong and the bigger cause, the same surely applies to his boss. I mean, Poppy says he's inside 10 Downing Street, holed up, depressed and doesn't know what to do. Resign, man. We're on resignation watch. I'm totally with you. I don't think he lasts. I don't see how he lasts.
It is not possible, and even if it were possible, the Labour MPs are not stupid enough to imagine that this is anything other than devastating for the party's reputation.
Yeah.
You know, the longer Keir Starmer goes on, the more this story just goes on and on. It gets more and more poisonous by the day, and it's incredibly corrosive. You know, Labour's poll ratings are already absolutely down the pan, you know, under 20%, which for a party with a huge majority is absolutely pathetic and truly alarming for Labour MPs. And I predict that they will go down several points more this week, whether or not Keir Starmer resigns. But if he chooses to hold on for a number of weeks, I think that the party will be in real trouble, and there's not many weeks to go now before those May elections.
In your experience, and you've got so much experience politically from a journalistic point of view, did you? I mean, we can all sit here and go, look, Labour will bankrupt the country. Have they got a plan? Blah, blah, blah. But we were so, all of us, fed up with the lies, the lack of seeing through anything the Tories did. I mean, at the end, 14 years, nobody was listening to the Tory party. Don't care what anybody says, right? They've achieved this in 18 months. You cannot tell me that you thought it would be this bad. This is, I mean, the Epstein thing is I think, the biggest political story for 100 years. I think it's bigger than Profumo as it goes. But you're looking on screen at a man who has the biggest post-war majority, and we can absolutely tell you he's toast. It's now, or at some point, he's going to go. 18 months in from winning that election, Isabel.
It is the most spectacular implosion of any administration that I have ever seen, or in modern British political history. You know, this, I think all of us who weren't on the side of Labour's politics nonetheless thought, well, you know, it'll be pretty horrible left-leaning, you know, socialism dressed up as something slightly less awful than socialism, and we'll sort of muddle along, and it'll be a bit like the years of under Gordon Brown. And nothing could be further from the truth. It has been one catastrophe after another, starting with those summer riots and the abysmal, appalling, reprehensible way Keir Starmer dealt with those, trying to characterise people who took to the streets peacefully as all being far-right thugs in the wake of the Southport killing. That, for me, was the start.
Shall I tell you what was the moment that I thought? Is when the very good people of Epping, the mothers, decided to protect their daughters, the pink ladies, and go out and say, we don't want a migrant sex offender in a hotel next to us. And our own government, our own Prime Minister, took the local council, who I salute, who won the closure of that hotel, took that hotel and that council back to court and won. And they were basically telling the British people, you know what? Migrants are more important. Illegal migrants are more important than you. That, for me, was the lowest point. And the puberty blockers while we're at it.
Look, there've been so many low points that it's hard to actually list them, isn't it? And I genuinely feel quite physically sick talking about what's happened. I think, like so many up and down the country, I'm genuinely aghast and disbelieving about how spectacularly this bunch of utter clowns, and some of them are not just clowns, some of them, in my view, are treacherous. And I say about Keir Starmer, about Lord Turmoil, about everybody that has been involved in the truly unforgivable sell-off of the Chagos Islands. We're all in disbelief at how bad this could have got. And the terrifying thing is, we may very well have another 3 years of this to go.
Can't see it happening. There's a couple of emails, actually, which is saying, Steve, if Starmer is in any way an honourable man, he has to genuinely think about calling an election rather than ceding power to others that cannot be trusted in his party. Now, we haven't thought about that. If you're cornered and there's no way out, I don't suspect, by the way, he gives a toss about the country, because I don't think he's shown that he does. But out of sheer spite, you lot aren't having this, you've ousted me, I'm calling a general election. That's not out of the realms of possibility either.
No, I have certainly thought about that, and it is within his gift to do that. I mean, I remember it being threatened, I think, probably by both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. You know, it is what cornered premiers do. It's almost the last sort of, you know, it's the kamikaze thing, isn't it? And it could be something that he uses to MPs, to Labour MPs, to say, look, if you do this, I'm going to call an election. And of course, they don't want that, because where the polls are at right now, the most of them are going to be losing their seats. So I'm not with Poppy. I heard her earlier. I think the chances of an election are very low. Okay. I put it at sort of 5%, possibly 10% at most. We can all dream, we can all hope that happens. But I think these are the desperate last thrashings of a beast that knows he's about to go to the slaughter.
Here's a very quick question, and I want to talk about reform quickly. I know you're busy. There is talk that there could be like a caretaker interim leader. This is a great question. There are people, naturally, the length and breadth of this country, who open-mouthed to saying, David Lammy could be the interim Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, right? Here's a question, Isabel, you'd know. Damon in Wigan. Does an interim who serves for a matter of weeks also end up getting £165,000 a year golden handshake pension for the rest of their life, as other ex-Prime Ministers do? Please tell me not.
Wow, that is actually a question to which I don't know the answer. I mean, there have been a few interim Prime Ministers. You remember when Dominic Raab had to kind of unofficially take over when Boris Johnson was very, very ill with COVID? I suspect the answer to that is no, because they've not been appointed Prime Minister. It is an acting job. It could happen for brief periods if a Prime Minister is out of action. You'd get into all sorts of weird technicalities, wouldn't you, about when is a Prime Minister really fully not a Prime Minister and so on. So I don't think that would be the case. But by the way, it was me that brought you last week, and I think it was probably you and I that was talking about it, the horrible spectre of David Lammy being prepared to take over. I think you'll recall I mentioned it. I said that I understood that those contingency plans were already underway as early as the middle of last week.
Have you ever in your life, did you ever think that we would be in a position where the entire Labour Party says, so how long can Starmer cling on? This man had the biggest majority in post-war British politics. He's a lame duck, isn't he, Robert Jenrick?
Yeah, he is. Look, this is a government that is collapsing before our very eyes. It's in open revolt against the Prime Minister, and presumably he's only got a short while left in office. And then what's going to happen? There'll be a long, protracted, messy, chaotic Labour leadership contest, and absolutely nothing is going to get done in government for months and months and months. And who is the big loser in this? Well, it's the British people, isn't it? Because everyone watching and listening to your programme this morning who's worried about their wages going nowhere, their bills going up, crime, their high streets being hollowed out, immigration continuing to be out of control, will be listening to this and thinking, what on earth is going on? Why is no one focused on the actual problems that the country is facing, instead of turning in on themselves once again, just like the last Conservative government did, frankly, when Boris and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak's governments fell apart in short succession. Why can we not just have some stability and a government that's actually going to get on and fix things in the country?
It's a really interesting point somebody just made, that Starmer is naturally cornered. They think they saw him, his hands shaking on Wednesday. McSweeney sold down the line. So I'll ask you about that quickly. Morgan McSweeney, in public life, he said, responsibility must be owned when it matters most, not just when it is most convenient. In the circumstances, the only honourable course for me is to step aside. But my question to you, Rob, is, if McSweeney has to resign because he advised Starmer to appoint the liar that's Peter Mandelson, doesn't the man who took that advice show terrible judgment and does need to... I just don't think there's any way for him to go. No, he has to go. Has to go.
Yeah, well, look, you're right. It's a completely mad situation. The guy who gave the advice has to resign, but the guy who took the decision doesn't. He gets to stay as our Prime Minister. People listening to this will think that's completely mad. Obviously, Starmer is admitting that he made the most terrible error of judgment in appointing a serially corrupt, depraved liar as our ambassador in Washington, be sacking the bloke who sent him some advice rather than questioning himself as the guy who took the decision. But actually, you know what? I've just been in my constituency in Nottinghamshire all weekend, and most people don't really care about Peter Mandelson. They always knew he was a bad man. They can't believe he ended up as our ambassador in Washington. But what they really care about are all the challenges facing the country in their own lives. And they're looking at this complete mess in Westminster, a Labour government that is now just basically fallen apart, and thinking, why can't we just have someone and a government that's going to actually focus on the real challenges facing the country? And that is why myself, Nigel Farage, Reform are meeting in Birmingham today to set out how we are going to step up now and begin to prepare for government, so that if there is an early general election, which I think is looking increasingly likely now, we're ready to actually serve the country with a strong set of candidates, people of stature and credibility from outside of the main political parties, wherever possible, who can really give something back to public life and to the country. Get serious, credible policies so that you can be confident that we can run the country in a way which, frankly, it hasn't been run in recent years under either Conservatives or Labour. And a top team of people who can grip things in a way that this shower just haven't done in recent years.
And I think you're right. I think when you're in the media and when you're in politics, you can get bogged down. We sit here and we go, you know, will he trade in a sulky way, anybody taking his crown by calling an election? I guess what parties like the Greens, straight face, and Reform have to do is they have to argue with the British people, this is what we should do, rather than carp from the sidelines. Just very quickly, you've been in politics long enough. We've talked about how the vultures are circling. Lammy, we've seen Rayner on the front page of the Mail having a makeover. MPs are lending staff to work on Wes Streeting's leadership campaign. We'll talk Reform, but if he does go, who's your money on?
Oh, look, I don't know. Look, well, let's take those in turn. Calamity Lammy, I mean, seriously, does anyone believe that he could be Prime Minister of our country? Angela Rayner, who is still under investigation from HMRC for failing to pay her taxes. And then you've got Wes Streeting, who supposedly is the grown-up, but he was the bloke who organised Peter Mandelson's stag do and is in this up to his neck. So it's a group of completely terrible candidates. None of these people, frankly, are capable of arresting the decline that the country is in. What is actually going to happen now is there's going to be a slow death of the Keir Starmer administration, where he limps on for days or weeks or months, all the while the British public miss out a long, painful and messy Labour leadership contest, and then we'll have a new Prime Minister who is not capable of fixing the problems that the country faces. And there'll just be lost months and years before we tip into a general election.
People laughed at Nigel Farage.
And Reform have to focus on now is actually being ready so that the public can have faith that this is not going to happen again. We've had this succession of failed governments under Boris, Liz, Rishi, Starmer, whoever comes next, Angela Rayner. We mustn't let this happen again, because the country just can't put up with this for years and years to come.
Page 8, Farage, I'm ready for number 10 in 2026. Nigel has said for a long time he didn't think this government would last. You talk about we're going to step up. We're going to talk today in Birmingham about what makes us. Some of the papers reporting, you don't have to answer this, that Nigel Farage is going to surprise you all and announce who's going to work in what sphere in terms of some sort of idea of shadow cabinet. Any news on that, Bobby J?
I don't know. It's ultimately Nigel's decision, and he's going to be setting it out very soon. But he's certainly going to say that he's going to be opening the selection of parliamentary candidates, because we now want to find people of real stature to come forward and to serve as members of Parliament. He's going to be saying in the coming days he will set out that top team. And he wants it to be people, some who will have experience, who have come from other political parties, but a lot will come from the outside world, which frankly is more important, because people are sick of just the same old names and faces. They want people who run businesses, veterans, doctors, nurses, people who've run prisons and hospitals well, people with real experience of the world to come forward and run government departments. And then we will be setting out serious, credible policies on immigration and crime, but also on the economy and public services, because we've got to fix this country now and turn it around. That people want to see answers to the problems, not just more failure like we've seen from successive governments.
You know I have a job to do, and you'll be delighted to know that it'll be me interviewing all 8 of you later in Birmingham, you lucky man. What job do you want?
Be kind.
Yeah. Oh, well, if you answer this. There are rumours that you will be Nigel Farage's shadow chancellor. Other people are saying, with your experience from the Home Office, Home Secretary, you described it just then as people from other political parties. If you were offered either of those roles, shadow Home Secretary, shadow chancellor, would you be happy to accept that?
Well, of course I'd be delighted to do whatever I can to help Nigel. I chose to walk away from the Conservative Party because I didn't feel it had changed. I didn't believe that it was capable of learning it from its mistakes and fixing the country, and to get on board something which I think is incredibly exciting, which is a movement to fix the country. And I will do whatever I can to help Nigel, who I think would be a great Prime Minister, frankly, somebody who has got conviction, who has been consistently right on the big issues facing the country, and stands in total contrast to Keir Starmer. People want a strong leader at a moment like this, and that's what they would get from Nigel Farage, and if I can help him in any way, I certainly will do.
Just final question, what's impressed you most about reform since you defected from the Tories, Robert?
There's a genuine sense of energy and momentum behind it. You know, when you see the old parties, these are dying organisations. You know, they struggle to get a couple of dozen people to come to a meeting. Reform gets thousands of people to come to its rallies and events, as you'll see later today in Birmingham, and people from all walks of life. The event we held in Nottinghamshire a couple of weeks ago that I went to had farmers, small business people, pensioners, had tradesmen, arriving in their white vans after a long day on a shift on a building site in Doncaster and Sheffield, coming to this because what united everybody in that room was that they saw a great country with so much promise, but in a real mess, and they wanted to do something different and to have a government that could come in and actually fix the challenges that face the country. And that is genuinely very exciting and new, and I'm pleased to be a part of it now.
Just quickly, so we're meeting later on stage in Birmingham. Are you flying in your private jet or going on the train?
I'm catching the train.
Oh, I'm going in a helicopter.
You're going by helicopter,
Yes, of course I am. Have that breaking news. If you haven't heard this in the last 2, 5, 10 minutes, William and Kate, just ahead of his arrival in Saudi Arabia for an overseas tour, a Kensington Palace spokesman has told journalists in the last half an hour in Riyadh, I can confirm the Prince and Princess of Wales have been deeply concerned by the continuing revelations. Their thoughts remain focused on the victims. That breaks ranks with King Charles. Morning, Sharon.
When a dustbin's full, it has to spill over, and I think this is just the spilling bit. I think something is really, really going to hit the fan, because there's a lot more people involved in this than just the people that they're looking at. How do we know that they're not a deflection on some real bad stuff? We can't have gone on all this time and, this just be the worst thing. I think it's just the start of it. Good show, Sharon from Yorkshire.
Good show, Sharon from Yorkshire. She says even bigger names. What bigger names have you got than the King's brother and the ex-Prime Minister's allegedly having threesomes? And oh, my Lord. Listen, I said we were going to... He's come back. Brilliant. Andrew Loney, author of entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York. We finished 20 minutes ago, and out has come this statement. If you're just tuning in, I'll tell you exactly that Andrew and I were talking about how the pressure on the royal family is going to grow, and you said, and I thought you were spot on, that there's a bit of a power struggle going on between King Charles and William, who wants to modernise, wants to look ahead. Charles is and hasn't said a lot. Is that out of loyalty for his brother? I wrote it down. You said the problem that is Andrew has been covered up for years. Well, in the last half an hour, Andrew, the Prince and Princess of Wales have broken ranks and announced from Riyadh via their spokesman that they are deeply concerned by the continuing revelations and their thoughts remain focused on the victims. Your initial response to that, my friend?
Well, I'm glad. I mean, people have been calling for this. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff in the papers this morning. I think this is a slight distraction. I mean, of course, one's thinking of the victims, but, I think what they need to be open about is actually what the palace knew and when they knew it and what they've done. Because I think what we do need to do is to find out exactly how Andrew has been protected up till now, and I think continues to be protected. I don't think we've got the full story of what happened and the flight from Royal Lodge and all that. So I think we just need a little bit more openness about actually what's been going on and why they didn't address this problem much earlier. The line is they didn't know, but I do know that they did know, and they were briefed many, many times by for example, the heads of the Foreign Office, MI6, all sorts of people were giving them information.
Giving them as an entity or individuals, my friend?
Well, giving certainly the monarch's private secretary, I know, was being briefed, and I know that they would have briefed the monarch. So, I mean, we know, I just know from my own research that protection officers have always had to report back to the head of royal security, and that goes back up to the sovereign. So, I mean, they had plenty of information coming in. So they knew about this. They've tried to keep it quiet. They now, because of the public outrage, have had to do something. But I think just saying that I feel sorry for the victims isn't really going to cut it with the public. And I do think there needs to be investigation. Andrew was bringing people were being sex trafficked to Andrew in royal palaces. People must have known this was going on. I think there needs to be a proper investigation of actually not just in Parliament about Andrew's activities, but also the palace need to do something to satisfy trust in because otherwise it looks like a classic cover-up.
Well, it's exactly what I asked you, did you suspect they knew more? What you're saying is that the palace kept quiet on what they knew.
Absolutely, and they've known for years, and they tried to shut this down. And as I say, they used strong-arm tactics, saying that they wouldn't give to media organisations who tried to raise this issue. They wouldn't give them access to members of the royal family. There were legal threats. There were a whole series of techniques were used to suppress this story, going back, I would say, 15 years.
It's unbelievable. When we think about, like, Front of the Sun today, Andrew, Andy leaked Envoy docs to Epstein. When we started this programme, so I love this programme because it just changes as the hours go by. People were saying, if he's done the same as Mandelson with Epstein documents, giving him the heads up on stuff, then he is in the same boat. Can you see a situation if the royal household has continued to close ranks, and in your mind for 15 years, can you see ever a situation where the police will be interviewing individual members of the royal family?
Well, I don't think anyone in this country is above the law, and if they have material witnesses and have information, yes, of course, I think they should. I mean, clearly, the problem is the sovereign cannot be subject to legal action. But I think they can certainly, we've seen this in past history. Heirs to the throne, for example, have been interviewed. But I do think that, everything's focused at the moment on the palace. The real question is, will these files on his time as a trade envoy now be released, as they should be under the Public Records Act? I spent 5 years being refused by the Foreign Office and the Department of Business and Trade afraid, from seeing any of these files, which I knew revealed the sort of things that this BBC article that Sun have picked up on had. And I think if the government is serious, actually, about dealing with this problem, as opposed to just yet another cover-up, then they need to ensure that those files, all of them, going back between 2001 and 2011, need to be made public as soon as possible, because I think it would give us plenty of information about how Andrew has misused his role. And if Mandelson is going to be investigated for this, Andrew should be investigated. And if he is, I mean, the evidence for Andrew is much stronger than for Mandelson.
See, that's really interesting for me, and you can only assume if you're listening to this, you know, you've been working on this for years, and you rightly said in the last interview you were ridiculed. But the truth of the matter is, I have a great increasing belief in the British public, and some parts of the media in my past I loathe. But what I love about the right side of the media, people like you and the things we're doing here, is the British people will not give up on this. The silent majority want an answer. Let me read you the first two texts I've had since you were on. Carl. Jez, just my thought. I believe the King should apologise and abdicate in favour of William. Let William clear out the old guard and start afresh with the young modern monarchy. And here's a question, Andrew Loney. Listen to this. Martin Slightholme. Has the Prince of Wales ever expressed any support or sympathy for the victims of the rape gangs here in the UK, says Martin in Norwich. No, I don't think so. To me, that sums up that this also is a turning point where the silent majority are going to go. We might not be anti-monarchy, but if you are going to exist in this world and use social media and have all of those things that you have, you're going to have to play the game like the rest of us and answer, as you quite rightly say, when the light is shone on you and your behaviour.
Yes, I mean, I've been calling for royal accountability and transparency, particularly on finances, for probably a decade and been ridiculed for it. But now it seems to be people realise that, you know, we haven't, that there isn't the accountability we need. It's been abused. I mean, this is also a national security question. The Chinese and Russians have penetrated the British establishment using the greed of various members of the royal family as the easy way in, because they knew there was no scrutiny. And what I would say is if there is nothing to hide, then there should be no problem about releasing these files. Or, for example, getting the protection officers to give statements saying that Andrew wasn't in London the night Virginia Giuffre claimed he was. I mean, it'd be very easy for him to prove his innocence. But I think as these releases come out, it's proving more and more just how rotten the state of Denmark is. And as I say, they're at this crossroads. Do they actually address this issue, as Prince William seems to want to, or do they stick their head in the sands, which is what the King is doing?
Andrew Loney, listen, great, mate. I know you've got a busy day and we really appreciate you coming back. Andrew Loney, they're the author of Entitled, The Rise and Fall of the House of York, reacting, he's been on twice this morning, two times, reacting to the news that in the last half an hour, ahead of their arrival in Saudi Arabia for an overseas tour, a spokesperson for the Prince and Princess of Wales, a Kensington Palace spokesperson, said, I can confirm that the Prince and Princess have been deeply concerned by the continuing revelations. Their thoughts remain focused on the victims. For many, that's a tick. For others, they go, that's ahead of your dad. For Andrew Loney, he says that's not enough. That's window dressing. How much did the royal family know about the problem that was Andrew, and for how long? I'm a royalist. The Queen gave him 12 million quid. If he has, as the front of the Sun says, been leaking confidential documents to Epstein whilst he was a trade envoy, surely, like Peter Mandelson, the ex-Duke of York, needs to feel the full force of the British law. Royals, this is interesting, Heather Sewell, King Charles should disown his brother Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Sarah Ferguson and cut them off. No money, no cards and no protection, and kick them to the curb. The only problem with that is, I think, a fear amongst the royal family about whether he would go nuclear. A very good morning stateside. I love her. Kinsey Schofield, happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I agree with you. I mean, I do think that Sarah Ferguson specifically has a lot of secrets she could tell that would embarrass King Charles about his past relationship with Princess Diana. And I think that she's a level of desperate she's never quite been before. And we've seen her desperate, cash for access, the works.
You would know more than me, but I was quite serious about this morning. Second page 2 of the Mail, pressure grows on the King to say sorry over the saga. I think this is probably one of the most worrying moments for the monarchy, a monarchy that you know I absolutely support, Kins. And I drew a parallel with when the Queen was up in Balmoral after Diana's death protecting the kids, and it just grew and grew and grew, and her public were demanding her presence and her voice. I think the same is going to happen, and I think the longer the royal family stay quiet, I think that they will be doing themselves irreparable damage, and I say that as a royalist.
Well, look, I will stress that King Charles has publicly acknowledged the victims. In November 2025, we were surprised. He and Queen Camilla issued a statement expressing profound sympathy for survivors of abuse of all kinds, and that included very pointedly the context around Andrew. That was not accidental. It was a clear shift towards centering victims rather than protecting reputation, which the royal family is notorious for. Queen Camilla has spent years advocating for survivors of violence against women, and that influence showed, in that statement. And additionally, a formal apology does not change the substance of what historically has already been said and was a major moment. Andrew had previously pitched a fit about acknowledging victims in past statements. They'd tried before. Because he was so nasty about it, they'd been removed. This was the king actually really putting his foot down in November. This acknowledgement is on the record, and for many victims, being seen and believed publicly is the meaningful step.
I get that, and you know me, I'm going to preface everything this morning and say I'm a bigger royalist than you, but I believe that might have been said, but I think so much more has come out this morning on the front of the page. Son Andy leaked Envoy docs to Epstein. I think the British public will very soon demand a fresh acknowledgement / apology / whatever it is, and I would be very interested as to the dynamic right now between William and Charles, because I could absolutely tell you that I suspect if William was king, he would already have made a statement. And I mean that. And I'm not saying that Charles has got skeletons, or what you said about Duchess of York, I'm sure is right. But to me, it's really at a point where if you want the monarchy to not have more detractors, now you need to speak.
Well, what are you suggesting, that King Charles come out and explain himself? Because I am under the impression, and I'm actually incredibly confident, that the king is finding about this in real time, the same as you and me. Like,
I think that. Then come out and say that, because, for example, and you said something to me the other day about the kids, which I completely took on board. I never thought I'd say this to you on this show. What did the Queen think the 12 million was for? Right. And you know me, God, the Queen was like me, look, 70 years, but what does she think the 12 million was for? Did he pull the wool over his mother's eyes? Fine. I just think even if they say we were duped, we only know what you know. This is appalling and abhorrent, and our thoughts are with the victims, which is why I've stripped him, which is why I've moved him. Yes, he's my brother, but his behaviour is completely outrageous. That, to me, is a monarchy connecting with its people.
Well, I mean, those negotiations or those strategies are happening behind the scenes right now as we speak. I think their first step was out of sight, out of mind, and that's why we saw them throw him on a plane at midnight and rush him, away from Windsor, because they didn't want to see him literally on his high horse trotting around Windsor anymore.
Waving to people last week. It's like, yes, God, man, get real.
But what I thought was really interesting over the weekend is this story you mentioned. I believe it's in the Telegraph, about him leaking confidential secrets. Andrew, I mean, it's the timing. During that same period, Peter Mandelson was the UK business secretary, and there are allegations that Epstein was being fed market-sensitive UK and EU information from multiple directions, but by Mandelson. There's no evidence that Andrew and Mandelson coordinated with each other, but the fact that sensitive access was flowing to a man had potentially hostile interests when it comes to the UK. I think that that's incredible information. Context matters because it helps explain how Epstein built that power. We all say to each other, how did he make his money? How did he get, how it's all about this like network that he created, this pyramid he created, but he monetized access to elite networks across politics, royalty, finance, and tech. And in Andrew's case, it directly collides with the rules. Trade envoys are bound by strict confidentiality, and any sharing of sensitive information is not just inappropriate, it's a breach of duty. I mean, I'm wondering if this is actually where Andrew really gets in trouble.
Yeah, well, I would say this, and like I keep saying, you know what I think? I think if he wasn't Andrew Windsor Mountbatten, he'd already have been investigated by the cops, and I can absolutely see that happening for the reasons that you say. You can look at somebody's sordid life, and yes, that's vile and victims, but if, like Mandelson, in any sort of way, and looking at some of these emails, it's just damning. But I don't think there's ever been, we were saying it earlier, Kins, anything like this. I don't think this is going away. And what we're suddenly saying in England is how much of an establishment cover-up is this Epstein saga? I don't know what they're saying in the States, but so many people, you just nailed it. Where did he get his money from? You know, he went from a millionaire to a multi-billionaire. There are conspiracy theorists over here that he was nothing more than being financed by the Russians, and he pulled in princes and dukes and prime ministers and presidents, and wow.
And keep in mind, like we were joking the last time we spoke about how he couldn't spell to save his life. And this, he was a teacher that was fired from school because he wasn't doing his job properly. It doesn't make sense. Like he attracted these people through vices, through sin, and it was like a giant pyramid scheme. But yeah, I just think that Andrew has really dug himself into a hole here beyond anything that the king could have ever imagined. And I know people have criticisms about King Charles, but he had an affair with one woman. He had an affair with one woman who he married, who he is still happily married to, who he should have married to begin with. Yep. But otherwise, I think he's a pretty great human being.
No, I've always been supportive, but I think there are defining moments in your rule. And I think that one of the defining moments for the Queen, genuinely, there were two. The first was when that Welsh village was sunk by the landslide, and she didn't go, and she freely admitted for years she sent the Duke of Edinburgh. She should have gone. The other was in her belief that she was staying in Balmoral, and my old man was there to look after the boys, right? The truth is her public needed her to speak, and I get the distinct feeling that I've never had time for the Republican cause. I think the royal family is an extraordinary thing that creates money that people can't even imagine. But this whole desire, Kins, to modernise the royal family and get level and get even with where we're at, right, needs to understand that this moment now, you know, he needs to speak. Here's a question for you. Do you think he'll be speaking to Starmer about Epstein at their weekly meetings, the King and the Prime Minister? It's a thought.
I think that that has to be a topic of conversation, no matter how uncomfortable it is. It absolutely has to be a topic of conversation.
It's just the whole thing. And we Poppy's here as well, we just sit here and think, how many more layers are there to this? How many more moments are we going to wake up to stories that you just think, secret sex, just so much. I mean, you know, last week we had Prince Andrew, Epstein and a threesome. Over the weekend there are reports from Andrew Loney that an ex-Prime Minister, Epstein, and a call girl had a threesome. So we're all sat here trying to work out it is. It's unbelievable. I come in every day and I say to Christian, do you think people are bored of this by now? Because it just won't go away. I mean, the pressure on actually the Prime Minister and, of course, Andrew we'll talk about in a sec. But yesterday was just one of those days where you just couldn't keep your eyes off your phone. I've so many things to ask you. My favourite line is, my favourite thing is the Wes Streeting interview. Have you seen this with Beth Rigby?
I have, yes, quite awkward.
I got to play this again if you're just tuning in, because people tune in the whole time. Basically what happened was Starmer's holed up in number 10. Nobody's supporting him. At 2:30, the Scottish leader, Anas Sarwar, basically said, I want you out. he apparently spoke to Wes Streeting at the weekend. None of the cabinet ministers then did anything about it. They all came out and supported Starmer for some reason, probably because he threatened a general election or he'd sack him. At which point, Streeting is a little bit cornered. I like on the front of the Telegraph, Starmer clings on after briefings war, with insiders saying, "We know who's behind this. His name rhymes with Les Wheating." That literally came from 10 Downing Street. Whereupon Wes Streeting thinking, Christ, that hasn't happened, the coup, and now they're going to have a go at me. I've got messages that are quite intimate with Peter Mandelson, so I better go on television and do a mea culpa. Have a watch. This is Wes yesterday.
There is a lot of genuine intimacy here and friendship. You know, Wes to you, to Peter, great pitch, lovely photos in the time Peter sends you a kiss. There's well done on the BBC. This is Peter Mandelson to you in June 25. I'm literally reading them as I go along. Well done on the BBC, very good kiss. Are you planning to visit the US this year? You hope so, exclamation mark, kiss. Are you embarrassed by that? I mean, that's quite an intimate friendship, isn't it?
No, look, an intimate friendship with Peter Mandelson. Look, I'm
there's dozens and dozens.
I'm very happy to.
But there are dozens and dozens of messages here.
And people will be able to read them.
Isabel Oakeshott. I mean, I don't put kisses on text to your husband-to-be. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous, man.
That was cringe, wasn't it? That was absolutely cringe. I mean, Wes Streeting, from a sort of ambitious politician point of view, did the right thing in getting those messages out, because he clearly knew that there was a strong likelihood that they would find their way into the public domain. So he's just sort of trying to get them all out there, particularly on a tempestuous news day when they were likely to get less coverage. So, you know, I can see his rationale there, but that interview will come back to haunt him. You know, if he thinks he's running for the leadership, that is just going to be played on a loop, isn't it?
I completely agree. It was such an interesting day. And Christian made, I think, the most salient point this morning in our meeting early on. He said the Prime Minister goes for a showdown with his backbenchers. We don't sort of believe that they're just silenced for a while. Some of them, as Simon Danczuk said, very inexperienced, and it would have been easy to do that. But more importantly is that the Cabinet, the entire Cabinet, in coming out under pressure or not to support Starmer, are showing their support for a decision to employ as US ambassador one of the best friends of the world's most notorious paedophile. So they are now completely implicated as well, aren't they?
I mean, I think that there's no sort of fiction here, really. It's obvious that that was just a charade yesterday, wasn't it? No one really believes that all those voices that came out within an hour of each other with these pre-prepared lines truly supports Keir Starmer. He's finished, it's over, it's done. It's just a question of the choreography now as to when he goes. He is mortally wounded. And now it's all about who's going to take over. And I think unexpected things could happen. You know, we're now all adjusting to the idea that we may be stuck with Starmer until after the by-election at the end of this month, or even after the May elections. But I think this is such a fast-moving situation. It's so febrile. I mean, have we heard, by the way, from Shabana Mahmood?
Well, I had a really interesting chat with several people yesterday, and I put that out there, that Shabana Mahmood is doing, you know, a job and is quite high profile. And it was told to me in no uncertain terms that the membership would not go anywhere near endorsing her. And we sadly doesn't bother me. Well, it would if he was the Prime Minister. The membership are 73% likely to vote Ed Miliband as the next leader of the Labour Party. And we can talk about Ange, whose leadership website went live. Oh, it wasn't her that did that, though. But yeah, Ed Miliband, who, by the way, has been very, very quiet, hasn't he, Isabel Oakeshott?
He has been very, very quiet. It's a bit like, you know, when your toddlers disappear and they're very, very quiet, and then you kind of go and find them and they've got your makeup bag and there's lipstick everywhere. That's what it's like when someone like Ed Miliband in these circumstances goes very, very quiet. He's a submarine and he's just waiting to let the weapons off. I think that it's evidently, I think Wes Streeting from yesterday is pretty damaged from that. You know, I know what he was trying to do, but I think it's damaging. So I think you are left probably with a Ed Miliband versus Angela Rayner contest with a few other also-rans when the time comes. And none of this is a particularly thrilling prospect, is it? There was something else I wanted to talk to you about, Jeremy,
Yes.
a couple of things.
Yeah.
There's one aspect, there's so much news has been pouring out that there are things that I think haven't got the attention that they probably deserve. Did you notice that as part of all the release of these files from the US in the last few days, that Jeffrey Epstein's death, a statement on Jeffrey Epstein's death, was drafted the day before he died?
Yep.
I think that's absolutely fascinating. That is not just some, newspaper predicting it. It was a US attorney statement the day before he died. And I sort of feel there's long been these conspiracy theories. Was he murdered? To me, that kind of says, yes, he was.
There's more as well. There's footage. You must have seen this as well. I completely agree with you on that. There's footage of a new inmate going into or walking past his cell. There it is. The night before he's murdered, or the night he's murdered, that nobody can identify. There's the person there, if you're watching on YouTube. A new inmate. This footage shows him being marched to his cell wearing an orange jumpsuit, and then later on there's footage of this complete stranger. For all the people who think that this is conspiratorial, and I'm totally... Oh, hold on. Approximately 10:39, a guard appeared in the direction of his cell, and then... it's all very... This is very dubious if you're not watching. I'm not going to describe it for the radio, but it does say to the people who have long thought that Epstein was in the power of other people, and I made the point yesterday, Isabel, where did he get his... He went from millionaire to multi-billionaire, as you said on yesterday morning's show. If he was, hoovering up information from a variety of senior politicians and royalty across the world, maybe he was financed by the Russians, and at the risk of anybody thinking I'm nuts, right? Maybe they knocked him off when he'd been as useful as he could be. I don't know. But the whole thing, I mean, it just doesn't go away, mate, does it?
It absolutely doesn't. And, for me, that is a really crucial bit of evidence, that a statement being drafted the day before, that tells you that there is a lot more to any of this than meets the eye. And I never thought anyway that Epstein was the kind of personality that would take his own life.
No. Whether you can in solitary as well, to be perfectly honest. I know the idea was that a couple of the officers have been paid or whatever. I just don't know, like you. Too many unanswered questions. Can I also... I want you to tell... This is brilliant, and I was given this yesterday, and you sent it to me just now. You make a really good point. In the midst of this huge scandal that seems to have engulfed us politically and engulfed the royal family, I said it earlier, there's still a bloody country on its knees, and people are still suffering, and a government that is handicapped by its own inability to tell the truth to each other are not doing what they want to do. And then we arrive, ladies and gentlemen, and pin back your lugholes. Isabel Oakeshott, tell me about Bangor University in North Wales.
Well, Bangor University has put out a statement, the students at Bangor University, saying that, and I'm quoting here, in line with our values, in line with their values, they will not be platforming anyone from reform for any debates. And I think Bangor University may come to bitterly regret that position because as of this morning, in line with Reform UK's values, Reform UK is threatening to defund Bangor University. No government funding, no student loans. And I actually think they mean it. We cannot be using taxpayers' money to support universities that shut down any kind of wide, free political debate. That is not what university education is all about. What an utter disgrace. Those self-indulgent little poppets who somehow think that they've got the right to monopolise political opinion and shut out the broad spectrum of debate that has its absolute heart in academia. If our universities can't have free academic debate, free debate about the future of our country, then what the hell is going to become of us? And by the way, just one more thing, because I know we're running out of time. I keep looking at my phone because I'm mesmerised by this cartoon in the Telegraph, this Mac cartoon. It shows a couple of people on the Chagos Islands, and it says, the UK is in crisis. I think we should give it to Mauritius.
Honestly, I completely agree. Can I just say about Bangor? Try and be balanced. I completely agree with you, but Bangor University is saying that the students' union that made this decision is separate to them and they don't agree with it. But the fact of the matter is, and the reason this story is so important, and I don't want to talk about my own kids, but I have a daughter at a university. I worry about our schools and I worry about our universities. I think they're being indoctrinated. I think there is only one political message being sent. And all those people at Bangor University and others who will don their T-shirts saying Free Palestine, you need to open your bloody minds and listen to both sides of the argument. I don't care. See, I'm old enough to say this. I don't care if I would spend my life talking to you and we would disagree profoundly, but that's a democracy. But you have to have that debate. You can't have just one side. And I'm afraid that so many of the young... God, I sound like my dad. So many of the younger generation, it's that's my way and that's my truth and that's my world. And you lot are a bunch of antiquated old dinosaurs who need to be cancelled. No, you need to understand there are 2, possibly 4 sides to the political argument. Open your bloody minds. I'm totally with you on this. I think it's outrageous.
It's so feeble, though, as well. I mean, these are supposedly intelligent young people who seem to think that any kind of debate that doesn't align with their political instincts, their political reflexes, has to be characterised as hate, peddling hate, or racism, or xenophobia. These are the words that they've used in their statement. And yeah, sure, I get that, you know, the student union is different from the institution of the university. But I think there's a pretty big overlap there too. And I think the university has a role. If its students are so misguided as to be pumping out this kind of really, frankly, quite sinister twaddle, then the university itself has a responsibility to step in and say, actually, you know what? We're not actually going to be a forum for you.
This morning, the royal author of the unauthorised biography entitled The Rise and the Fall of the House of York, Andrew Loney. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thanks. Very nice to be back.
I feel like I'm going to have you on every minute, because yesterday we started the show, we were talking to you, we were talking about how the royal family needed something. There was just a feeling in the country that they needed to give something. And then, of course, before William arrived in Riyadh, he and the princess made a statement. Then later on the back of this, and I want to play this clip, because this is really, I think, important. The King was in Clitheroe yesterday afternoon and he was heckled. Just listen and watch this, my friends.
Charles, how long have you known about Andrew and Epstein? Have you been protecting Andrew from prosecution?
That obviously, Andrew, had an impact, because later in the evening, the King announced that he stands ready to support any police investigation into his disgraced brother Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. He said, while specific claims in questions are for him to address, if we are approached by Thames Valley Police, we stand ready to support them as you would expect. Pretty seismic shift in 24 hours, Andrew Loney, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think it's coming really from pressure from social media. I still don't think it's enough. I mean, I think what we do need to know is, what did the palace know? When did they know it? What did they do then? And what are they going to do now? I think this is all just attempt at optics. It's not actually transparency. Saying that they'll cooperate with the police is very different from actually coming forward and explaining why they've protected him for the last 15 years. I mean, I know that the palace have known about these stories for a long time, and they didn't deal with the Andrew problem. They're only dealing with it now because the King is being heckled.
I couldn't agree more, and I find myself not even compromised. I find myself opening my mind in a different angle towards the monarchy that I've always supported. I know that you said yesterday on the show you were pilloried when you came out with these criticisms. The autobiography was unauthorised, and a lot of people put the boot in. But you are being proven right on a daily basis, and I'm sad to say I completely agree. That heckler might be one voice. That's just going to grow. People are going to say, how long have you been covering up what is the extent of your knowledge? Is it okay to say, well, we knew he was friends with a paedophile, but that's it? It's a really interesting moment, isn't it, for the monarchy in its entirety?
Yes, I mean, there are three problems. One is the financial irregularities, the fact that he was sharing confidential information in a job which was a taxpayer-funded, in effect, civil servant job. If they're going after Mandelson, they have to go after Andrew for misconduct in public office. It's quite clear that women were being trafficked to him, including to royal palaces, so there's a good case there for sex trafficking. There's also the national security angle, the fact that Andrew has got himself involved with Russian intelligence and indeed Chinese intelligence. And there needs to be a proper investigation into his activities. I mean, the fact is that this is about financial corruption at the heart of the royal family from a senior royal covered up by the institution. Just saying we feel sorry for the victims, I'm afraid, isn't going to cut the mustard with the public.
I don't know if I asked you this yesterday. If I did, I apologise. If they have been silent, the monarchy, and their example would be, their reasoning would be, we didn't know the extent of it, and others would say, well, you should have known the extent of it. How serious do you think this could get for the king? Do you think that the clamour could literally end King Charles's reign?
Yes, I think it could. I mean, I think they seem unable to learn the lessons of the past. With social media, they do need to be more transparent. They go through this gesture stuff, which just doesn't sort the problem out. The fact is, they've tried to shut the story down for years, to the extent of issuing legal threats against journalists, strong arm pressure to deny them access to royal interviews, etc. So the king has known about this. The Queen protected Andrew. She turned people away who came and complained. And I think they have a lot of questions to answer, as does the Met. Why has it taken a private prosecution to actually get them to do anything? And why are the government not releasing all the files on Andrew's time as a trade envoy? I spent 5 years trying to get access to them. What are they hiding? Well, we now know.
It's also interesting for me, and I liked when you started and you said, and I think this is really important, that if you're going to prosecute Mandelson, then the very least we should expect is that even members of our royal family, I know the king can't be prosecuted, but others, right, should be culpable. And what frightens me, and I mean that genuinely, is a bit when I think about the grooming gang lack of inquiry, and I question whether the establishment has covered this up. I mean, you're talking this morning as if the royal family have covered this up, even the Met Police, and I can't say I'm sat here disagreeing with you. You're putting this at the door of several institutions, right?
Yes, there's been a huge cover-up for years. I mean, this is why there needs to be a parliamentary investigation. All those former heads of UKTI who've never spoken publicly wouldn't speak to me. They know what was going on. I mean, one of the things I learnt yesterday from someone in the UKTI was that Andrew was putting these massages on the taxpayers' bill, and they were being put forward, being supported by senior officials. You know, I've got hardly anyone to talk who served, for example, in Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan. We know what was going on there. Again, diplomats were actually sending prostitutes into his hotel. Now, this is not what we pay diplomats to go abroad and do. So I think there's really big questions for a lot of people. Andrew didn't operate alone. He was part of a huge network. And it's time that actually we had a little bit of transparency.
You talked earlier about, when I asked you, could this lead to the end of the king's reign? And you said yes. Many people texting me this morning saying the only way out of this for the monarchy is for King Charles to abdicate and pass the throne to William and start a new era. Is the future King William implicated at all? Do you feel? Could he be held responsible with an overview of the monarchy, or would that be a clean break in your mind?
I think that would be a clean break. I think that we're moving towards that position just because of the cack-handed way that they've dealt with it. I don't think William knew. I certainly don't think he can be blamed for anything. I think he's tried to interfere. Clearly, there's a hierarchy there, and he can only do so much. It's Charles and I'm afraid the former Queen who really have the questions to answer.
And also, you said yesterday, let's not forget the images of King Charles years ago with £3 million in plastic bags from donors across the Middle East. That's a fact, right? It's a fact.
Yes. I mean, I think, there are questions, I'm afraid, for the king and his dealings in the Middle East and to support Dumfries House. William, seems to be clean, and I do think we are moving to a position where the easiest thing would be for the king to abdicate.
Which to many will be utterly shocking. Can I ask you a very direct question? I haven't got long. And I made a big thing about this. You know, Andrew should face the same justice that Peter Mandelson. Can you see a point where the King's brother, Andrew Loney, goes to jail?
Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, I hope, not me. No, I can't see him going to jail. I think he will do a midnight flit, and possibly aided by the royal family. He'll go to a country without an extradition treaty, and justice will not be served. I don't see him paying any penalty for his behaviour, unfortunately.
Unbelievable. The other side of the Epstein story is the royal one will cross to Los Angeles, California, and say a very good morning to the legend that is Kinsey Schofield. Hello, darling.
Kiss, kiss, kiss.
Oh, God,
Happy
honestly.
Valentine's Day.
What? Oh, thank you. Could Matt Vickers, who's with us, is single and he's not getting any Valentine's action at all. Could you maybe send Matty a kiss?
Absolutely. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Hello.
Look, he's absolutely hamstrung. He doesn't know what to say. I love it. Kinsey, we spoke yesterday morning at 6:45. At that point, we were both, I think, saying that the royal family might well come under pressure to say something, that this was engulfing them, and we're both royalists. At about 9 o'clock, ahead of his visit to Riyadh, the Prince and Princess of Wales office announced that they were thinking of the victims. We thought that might, later on, you'd finish, but we were wondering on the show later on whether that might bounce the King and Buckingham Palace into more. And last night it happened. King Charles yesterday evening said he stands ready to support any police investigation into his disgraced brother Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. Thames Valley Police are assessing emails that Andrew shared with Epstein whilst he was a trade envoy. And the King has made it clear in words and through unprecedented actions his profound concern at the allegations, while the specific claims are for Mr Mountbatten-Windsor to address. If we as a palace are approached by Thames Valley Police, we stand ready to support them as you would expect. That's pretty seismic, isn't it?
Well, I have to ask your opinion here, because we kind of went head to head yesterday when I said I felt like they had done enough in November of 2025, and you disagreed with me. You said that was not what the tone was in the UK, and you felt that there needed to be some stronger support for the victims. You felt like never complain, never explain was not the appropriate route here. And so do you feel good about what you've seen over the last 24 hours? Is it enough for you? Or do you need to hear more from the royal family? Because I'm also seeing complaints that this looks like the royal family just trying to, a PR opportunity for the royal family, a crisis PR move by the royal family, and not something that is sincere.
It's a really great question. The thing is, the royal family, I think we talked yesterday about the Queen when Diana sadly died, and the Queen stuck at Balmoral with the grandchildren, didn't come down, and eventually the feeling in the country was, you've got to come and speak. We need to hear from our monarch. I feel the same, perhaps not with the same intensity. I think it's different this time. I think William jumped quickly. I think his father had to follow suit. The critics will say, this is a PR exercise. Let's just remember the reason this story's moved as well, Kins, is that actually we're now talking about a potential member of the royal family having passed trade secrets to the world's most notorious paedophile. And if Peter Mandelson, the ex-US ambassador, who seems to be at the centre of everything politically here, if he's going to face the full wrath of the law as he should, then I believe Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor should. The problem that the royal family might have, and you know me, I repeat and I'll say every day I'm a royalist, is the one question that everybody keeps saying to me is this: so how long have they covered up for the problem that is Andrew? How long have they known the depth of what he did? Are you telling me that courtiers, security officers, close protection security officials, did they know about girls being trafficked by Epstein to Buckingham Palace? Nobody's blaming the Queen, but I do think, sadly, I think this is a big move. But I'm not sure what the British public in their entirety will say. Do they want more? Do they want the royal family to say, yes, we've been shielding this guy? I think the King's an honest man and he wants to deal with it, but I think the pressure will stay there. Will this alleviate it a little bit? Hopefully.
Well, I think that there will be a lot of questions asked about why the British government has blocked Andrew Loney's pursuits of some records involving Andrew's time when he was Britain's trade envoy. They said that it wasn't of public interest, and it wasn't, that's why they didn't share these schedules. And he asked for, as far as I can understand, as far as I know, it's like flight logs, and he just wants to know who he met with and when and why they were meeting. And that was blocked. So I think that the British government, I'm not saying that anyone protected Andrew, but perhaps they should reassess that decision not to give Andrew Loney those documents.
I think Andrew Loney, I agree with you. I think Andrew Loney has been vociferous. When he came out and was talking in his book, The Fall of the House of York, and he was denied this, he was pilloried. He was absolutely pilloried about what he said about the ex-Duke of York. It's turned out that he's absolutely spot on. I just feel a bit like the political scenario here. I just don't think it's going to go away. I don't know if there's anything that can save Keir Starmer, hopefully not. And I don't think there's anything at this moment that the royal family... I couldn't say, if you definitively do that, King Charles, that'll take it away. I think this is such an appalling story, and it goes so deeply. And I didn't know if I asked you this yesterday, but this Epstein creature, you think the Crown Princess of Norway had sent him letters saying, I love you. Prime ministers, dukes, members of royal families, the most successful business people in the world, Bill Gates. It is pictures on his island of Mick Jagger, Sir Richard Branson. I can't get over how this guy's tentacles, how his power started or where it came from. Was he an agent for the Russians? I don't know. It's just the most extraordinary story that will not go away. But from the royal family's point of view, I think people need to know how long they've been sweeping this under the carpet. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think that you and I do agree that King Charles did not know the extent of how horrible this was going to get. No. Otherwise, I think that Andrew would have been gone after the death of Queen Elizabeth, very quickly after she passed away. And so I think he's as mortified as we are. I do think deep down this is a man that has a good heart. And, when we talk about his past transgressions, it was with one woman who he married who is now Queen Camilla. So I do want to defend him in this department. I especially think Prince William wasn't aware of some of the things that he's accused of doing. And, it's just kind of the comfort with Epstein. It's vulgar. It's, you are who you associate with, and they were just way too comfortable with each other.
I completely agree. I also want to talk about Ghislaine Maxwell. This is her yesterday, ahead of at a congressional disposition yesterday. She utterly refused to answer a question, pleaded the fifth. Have a watch.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly declare and affirm, under the penalty of perjury, that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Ms. Maxwell, were you a close friend and confidant of Jeffrey Epstein?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions. My habeas petition is pending in the Southern District of New York. I therefore invoke my right to silence under the Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution.
Kinsey, can I ask you a question? I interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell. I have no sympathy for her. I believe that she was part of this in a massive way. She's the only person in jail. When you look at the names of people implicated, I hope they go after everybody when the dust settles, because I'm not sticking up for Ghislaine Maxwell, but it does seem that she's the only one in prison right now, doesn't it?
And I think that was their solution to try to make this go away quickly, throw her in the slammer. But the House Oversight Chairman, James Comer, did say that her refusal was deeply disappointing. He said that the committee had planned to question her about the crimes committed alongside Jeffrey Epstein, whether others were involved. They wanted to ask her about some of the people, the names we've seen released throughout these files. And according to her attorney, Maxwell says there is a straightforward path to hearing her side of the story, clemency from President Trump. And her attorney argued that only then would she be willing to speak fully and honestly. But I will say what I thought thought was interesting was her attorney claimed that both President Trump and President Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing and suggested Maxwell alone could explain why if granted clemency. So dangling a little carrot there. But for now, she remains silent, survivors remain waiting, and Congress is left without answers.
Peter, yeah, I hate it's always the fact that we've terrible things to talk about. Let's start with this Afghan migrant. I have to keep repeating this. Only identified by the police, Pete, after he used his Home Office issued debit card to buy the girl a drink after he'd raped her. And he's going to go to jail and stay in this country and we're going to pay for it. What the hell is wrong, pal?
Well, the sickening irony of yesterday and him being convicted was that it came on the same day that the lamentable Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, professed to love this country. Actually, if he'd loved this country, he would have invoked special measures by calling a state of emergency and stopping these rapists, these murderers, these people who otherwise contribute nothing to British society other than taking benefits and the such like. He would have stopped this. He would have come up with a solution. He's been in power long enough to do so now, but because of his human rights lawyer background, because he's captured by the far left ideology of the lunatic Labour Party, nothing has happened. Our daughters, our wives, our sisters, our cousins are all now in increasing danger because of the vermin that is washing up on our shores.
You know, people watch it and they go, what? But it's true. I don't understand, Pete, genuinely. We're both parents, right? I don't understand how anybody can sit there and be worried about the optics of whether I look like I've moved to the left or levelling up or whatever else green net zero rubbish when young English girls are being put in jeopardy and danger by men who are coming to this country for illegal reasons, who do not speak our language, who do not share our values. That is not racist, it is a fact. Look at that piece of scum right now on the television. And we give him a Home Office issued debit card. If it wasn't massively embarrassing, it would be, it's laughable, Pete. And we look at all of these things and we think, this is becoming the norm. Robin Newcastle's right. This is becoming the norm. I hate the fact that people aren't shocked. They should be absolutely repulsed by this.
Think of Rhiannon White. Think of the poor child raped in Leamington Spa, not so many miles from Nuneaton, not so long ago. Yet another illegal Afghan convicted of rape. Think of the damage that are being done to the daughters of this nation. Starmer and Hermer and the left-wing lunatics are prioritising this diversity over the daughters of this nation. It is utterly disgusting that this filth is being allowed to wash up on our shores and then go on to commit the most heinous of crimes, including rape and murder. Something should be done. They clearly have no conscience. They have no courage. They have no willingness to.
Well, you know, I think it's worse than that. I think it's worse than that, and I think you can ally this to what happened or what hasn't happened with the grooming gangs inquiry. I think we have politicians genuinely today who are making decisions based entirely on what section of society or the electorate they might upset if they're a little bit stronger than they are at this moment. I don't know how any male politician goes to sleep at night and is prepared to even begin to think that that poor girl is, what did somebody say to me earlier? Collateral damage? I know what I'd do if that was my 12-year-old, and it shames me and it embarrasses me and says to me that the world must look at my country and think, what an absolute joke. The other story, of course, for you, teen held on terror stabbing of boys 12 and 13, allegedly yesterday. This was in Kingsbury High School in Brent, yesterday lunchtime. Witnesses claim the attacker shouted Allahu Akbar and then stabbed a 12 and 13-year-old both in the neck. They're fighting for their lives, and he, at 13, has been arrested on the suspicion of attempted murder. And we've got politicians, you know, jousting for Starmer's job, and we've got kids being stabbed at school at lunchtime. That didn't happen when we were kids.
Let's talk about Brent for a moment, if we may. That part of northwest London represented for decades by lunatic left Labour MPs, which is so often put up as a beacon of diversity, of integration. Utter codswallop. Nonsense. It's a fine example of how integration has failed. Yes, of course, those who came over, the Windrush generation, for example, many have gone on to be wonderful Brits who we idolise as sports stars, as beacons within the media, as absolute titans of industry and the such like. But this whole lunatic left push for diversity and then to call us all tolerant is utter nonsense. We have imported some of the most intolerant people on the planet onto our streets. And as long as we've got politicians that want to prioritise diversity over the daughters of this nation, this is simply going to get worse and worse.
How do they morally in their heads justify putting diversity, DEI or whatever you call it, ahead of the safety of kids? How does that rest with somebody? And by the way, Boris Johnson is going to get it as well. 1 million people. They weren't doctors and surgeons and anaesthetists. They were, I'm afraid, criminals, many of them without any skills and no language, who have come here simply because we wipe their backside and give them benefits. How do these politicians think that this, not public, how does it sit with them personally? Do they not care?
Well, the idiotic Boris Johnson let that wave of immigration in here because economists got in his ear and said this will create economic growth.
Yeah.
Well, of course, it didn't. It's done the exact opposite. So many figures released this week. 75% of these people washing up on our shores go on benefits and never contribute positively to the economy of this nation. So not only are they murdering and raping, they're fleecing us hand over fist, taking hard-earned taxes from the like of you, me, and your alarm clock wonderful audience. It's absolutely ridiculous. We need a new government. We need somebody who's going to come in here with the gumption, with the power, with the strength of character, and hopefully 2 terms of government, so that all of this can be stopped, reversed, and once again, the values of this nation, hello, good morning, please, thank you, manners, queuing, respect for the law, man-made law, and so much more can be reinforced, reintegrated into our youngsters so that we can have a semblance of this great nation that we all used to love and grew up in.
Couldn't agree anymore. Final thing for you, boss. Andrew Loney is on again later on the show. Wrote a book years ago about the fall of the House of York, and he made lots of accusations some years ago about the Duke of York, all of which have come back to home to roost with the disaster and the disgusting revelations of the Epstein saga. One of the things that's obvious, and I'm a royalist, I know you are as well, is that the pressure on the royal family is going to grow and grow, and whatever way that goes, goes. But he claimed yesterday that many institutions have covered up Andrew's behaviour, not only the royal family, he included the Met Police. What's your response to that, Pete?
Well, those who provide close protection to the royals very much pride themselves on their discretion, because, of course, if you are by somebody's side almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, no matter who they be, His Majesty the King or any other member of the royal family, you will witness indiscretions. So, of course, these people pride themselves on keeping a vow of secrecy, for example. Ken Worf, Diana's former bodyguard, is about the only one that's ever broken cover from the close protection world and spilt beans, but he's always done that in a positive way. It is obviously, blatantly obvious now that some involved in close protection of the former Prince Andrew must know stuff. And it is about time that they break whatever vow of loyalty it is, step forward and tell the truth. The King has declared Buckingham Palace will do all it can to support police investigations. Well, those close protection officers who once protected the most abominable member of the royal family I think there has ever been, now is the time for them to step forward, speak up, tell the truth.
Are they culpable if they don't?
Most definitely. Misconduct in public office is an offence where doing nothing can be a criminal offence. So if they do nothing, if they keep a vow of silence, and if they know stuff and there is sufficient evidence, then they could well find themselves having their collars felt.
Andrew Loney, how are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thanks. Very nice to be with you again.
Well, the people call for it, my friend. The response to you is phenomenal. I have to say, this royal story for me, and I said it earlier, really is not going away. We've talked and seen about Andrew and the revelations. Just overnight, a couple of things I wanted to throw at you. The first, Prince William in Riyadh, heckled, people shouting questions about Andrew. How much did you know? Should more happen? He, head down, ignores that. We saw the clip yesterday, of course, with King Charles, where the man shouted out, "Why are you covering up for your brother?" You and I spoke yesterday about intolerable pressure. Overnight, victims of Jeffrey Epstein and a senator calling for the ex-Duke of York to be hauled in front of Congress. Can you see that happening, Andrew?
I can't see him being hauled in front of Congress because he doesn't have to, but he could be hauled in front of the House of Commons, and I think that's certainly an option. But it's clear the royal family are not able to read the room. The public, again, are way ahead of the royal family. As you know, I feel that Charles has actually been compromised by this situation. I mean, he's known about it. He hasn't dealt with it. They tried to cover it up and actually suppress it for years. And I think making mealy-mouthed comments about sympathy for the victims isn't going to persuade the public that the royal family are taking this seriously. And I think we've now reached a point where, unless they make some really clear statement about what they knew, when they knew it, what they did then, what they're going to do, I think that Charles should be considering his position. It's very similar to Starmer, someone whose judgment has been called into question, and it's time now for the stables to be cleaned.
It's really interesting, actually. We talked yesterday about, could the ultimate happen? A man, Charles, who waited all of his life to be king, is he so compromised that the only way to save the monarchy, the thing that I know in his heart and heart he believes deeply in, he's talked about, streamlining it and making it more appropriate for 2026. I said to you yesterday, if the option of saving the monarchy is to abdicate in favour of a clean sweep and his son and the wonderful Kate, who I think garner huge, huge respect, would he do that? Kinsey Schofield said something this morning which I wanted to put to you, which I think is fascinating. She said there's a way for that to happen. He's ill, the king, isn't he? It's a very interesting point.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think this could be his great service. I mean, this was an opportunity to reform the royal family, and if that requires him to step aside for a new generation who are not tainted by these allegations, that may be his greatest service. But absolutely, they have an excuse for him at least to take a less active role, even if he doesn't abdicate. So they do have some options, but I don't think they can continue to make rather bland statements, given the anger that there is out there against the way that this story is unfolding. And I think also pressure needs to be put on both the police and on the government, because they too have been covering up for years and need to get their act together.
Well, I was talking to Peter Blexley about the Met Police and close protection, and he said they absolutely should now, privacy is very important, turn a blind eye, but they will be culpable. And I think you're right. I think people in the police forces, close protection, security, and all those Foreign Office officials that you talked about yesterday. And I just, overnight, there was a poll here. Majority of people think the king should encourage Andrew to testify. This ain't going away, is it, Andrew?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's still a lot more to come out. I mean, I found a lot of new material, which is very damaging. I mean, it's getting darker and darker, the story. I think also we mustn't take our gaze away from Sarah Ferguson, who's shamelessly running around the Middle East trying to get her career back. And she was a material witness to all this. She was actually, there are more numbers for her in Epstein's book than Andrew. She was often staying there. She would have seen things. Why hasn't she been questioned? And I think there are big questions over Sarah Ferguson's use of charities for her own financial benefit, and indeed for ways that she's been running companies. Lots and lots of stories I found which I think could be investigated and could well lead to charges.
And your reason for saying that you believe there's been an institutional cover-up for years is because And more strength to your elbow. You've been able to find this. Now, many barriers were put in your way. You were threatened, weren't you? You were ridiculed. You were threatened with legal action from all sorts of quarters, which is why, in a way, it sustains you to keep going.
Yes, I mean, it's very gratifying to see that the things that I found and the things I was told have been proved to be true. But there is a big campaign against me. I understand paid for by an Arab billionaire to discredit me and the book, negative reviews. I mean, it has been a long, long campaign just for trying to tell the truth.
In terms of when you look at the royal family now, I don't know enough about your background, but were you a royalist? Because one of the accusations is that this is simply because you don't like the royal family, but actually everything that you say to this point has come to be true. What's your motivation, Andrew?
Well, I think, all my books, and my books go back, 40 years, writing about, for example, spies like Guy Burgess, have been about cover-ups. And about, particularly by the establishment. So this is nothing new. I'm a former Conservative political parliamentary candidate, so I'm not someone from the wild left. I'm a very strong monarchist, which is why I feel so strongly that this corruption needs to be rooted out for the sake of the institution itself.
Do you think that this... God, there's so much I could ask you, blimey. Do you think that it can survive if, say, the king... I mean, look, let's ask you the question. Do you think he could, should or might use his cancer as a reason to step aside?
I think that would be a very neat device. I think, as I say, he's deeply compromised. I mean, nothing was done for years. I mean, Andrew was under MI6 surveillance. This stuff was reported to the Queen and to Charles. Charles has been on the throne now 3.5 years. He can't. When I suggested the Queen was complicit in this, I was ridiculed, and now we find that she's the one who's been thrown under the bus by the royal family to take the blame. And I think the neatest solution might be to use his health concerns for him to step back, absolutely.
In terms of the monarchy as an institution, we hear a lot about, it needs to modernise, and Charles has led the way. Just to repeat, you believe that William and Kate can secure its future with that sort of clean brush because they're not old enough to have been implicated. That's your reason for supporting them, right?
Yes, I mean, I think they grasp the nature of this problem. They're not involved with it in the way they haven't been involved in this cover-up that's been going on. They're wildly popular. I mean, clearly, William would prefer to wait until he comes to the throne. But I do think this is a huge crisis for the monarchy. I mean, I think far worse than 1936, which I've written about. And it just may be that is the solution, because this process of just sitting on their hands, hoping the problem's going to go away, isn't going to work this time.
Well, that old adage of the royal family is always just, carry on, don't complain. But silence is not, not going to work. Can I pick up on something you just said? You talked about how Andrew was under surveillance from MI6. You also talked about much more to come. I'm sure you can't give too much away, but what are you talking about? What was he under surveillance for?
Well, Andrew had some very, very dodgy associates, as we know, and these included sex trafficking and money laundering rings run by Russian intelligence. So, as I keep saying, this is a national security problem. The easiest way to penetrate the British establishment was through the royal family and the greed of particular individuals, because there is absolutely no scrutiny. So if you want to launder money, you can do it through royal accounts, which are not subject to any supervision. I mean, if we remember back, Andrews was able to sell his house Sunninghill for £3 million more than the asking price when there were no other bidders. And this was all done through secretive trusts, and people like the solicitors and the bankers, I could better not name them, who should have gone through the money laundering regulations, did not do so. It's now clear that this was money that was being laundered into Britain. The fact is that Andrew was under surveillance, as was Sarah, for some of her associates going back, and this was reported to the palace. In fact, the palace was sent away with a flea in their ear. There's one story I was told of $5 million in a suitcase given to him in Kazakhstan. This is financial corruption at the heart of the royal family that was actually supported by the institution itself.
And of course, you talk about that suitcase, and it brings me back to that time that King Charles, then Prince Charles, had the suitcase, well, the 2 plastic bags of money when he'd been to Saudi Arabia. That's a fact. That was reported at the time. You say tarnished by it. Maybe that's the whole problem here, that the public will not accept, just as you quite rightly just say, oh, let's keep quiet and it'll go away. It just keeps reminding me of the Queen in Balmoral, as I said to you yesterday after Diana's death, that the strength of the British people should never be underestimated, the silent majority, and I think they're going to push and push and push. What else can you tell us, if you can, that we should expect to be hearing? What the murkiness you talk about?
Well, I mean, I understand that Surrey police have contacted the FBI about a story there connected with Andrew. There are all sorts of stories about dead bodies and people being killed in rough sex.
Sorry?
There are
Sorry?
stories.
Dead bodies, people being killed during rough sex?
Now, this is all in the Epstein revelations and hasn't been dealt with. So there's a lot of stuff that is beginning to emerge. It's much darker. I had a lot of people talking to me about satanic rites, which I totally ignored, but there were lots of them. And I'm now beginning to look at some of those stories again.
Kinsey, this royal story that we have been talking about tied into Epstein will not go away. We've had a poll overnight in the UK that think a majority of British people think the King should encourage, as strongly as he can, Andrew to testify about Epstein. We saw a senator last night with some of the survivors from the Epstein trauma say, listen, mate, get your backside over here. It's the least you should do. What's your take on this?
Well, you know, I love your country. And a part of me feels like, why wouldn't American politicians focus their attention on some of the Americans featured in the Epstein files versus going after the big fish, going after Andrew, knowing that it's not likely going to happen? Don't you think it's a little ridiculous that we're not focusing on our own leadership here?
Yeah, I do, and I do desperately try to balance it, and I think I look at Ghislaine Maxwell in prison, and I think that's quite right, but she's the only one who is in prison. For a long time, I thought that the Duke of York, ex-Duke of York, seemed to be the only person who was being done. But there is so much tied up into this, and he's become, I suppose, a figurehead for the horror that is Epstein. I have to say, after we spoke yesterday, I had Andrew Loney on, and he said something that I really do agree with. I think the monarchy's in real trouble. I think that if you saw William yesterday in Riyadh, people were shouting out questions which he ignored. At Charles the day before, somebody shouted, how much do you know? And it doesn't sicken me, that's the wrong word. It really concerns me, mate, that I mean, Andrew thinks that the King might have to abdicate and sweep it clear and give it to William. I mean, he genuinely thinks that strongly.
Well, I did see the polling that there is a significant amount of people that do believe that Andrew should testify, and King Charles would be facing, I think he is facing what may be the most difficult moment of his entire life, certainly the most difficult of his reign. I would argue it rivals the emotional and institutional chaos of the Diana divorce and death. But this time, he's not a husband or a son. He is the sovereign, and that makes the stakes undeniably higher. The world is watching. This is history in the making. If Andrew testifies, it will be an unbelievably humiliating moment for the British royal family. The headlines will be vicious. The global press will descend. Every allegation, every association, every past misstep will be dragged back into the light. It would be an avalanche of negative coverage that could dominate the news cycle for weeks, if not months. And unlike past scandals, this one cuts into issues of exploitation and abuse, the kind of scrutiny that it doesn't just embarrass the monarchy, it can permanently erode public trust. There is a real possibility it could turn segments of the public against the institution itself.
And I couldn't agree more. And for a king who wants to modernise, because I think he's always understood that the sense of entitlement, I think that's the word you need when you're talking about Andrew, the sense of entitlement to many is now unacceptable. And for a man who's tried to streamline it and get it right, this is a terrible, terrible situation. I don't dislike King Charles. I think he's had you spend your entire life knowing your job's only going to happen when your mother dies, and if you open your mouth, you're interfering, and if you do nothing, you're a layabout. I think he's done remarkably well. But I do think, and I really am not over-exaggerating this, that the feeling, and it's increasing in this country, you can tell it is, how long you've been covering up that the problem that is Andrew, that everybody keeps alluding to. We talked yesterday, some people didn't like it. What did the Queen think the 12 million was for? But her legacy is intact. He was her favourite son. But how many people inside those palaces, courtiers, close protection officers, all of them knew what this man was up to. Because at the end of the day, what's happening here, I don't know about the States, is the silent majority's voice is being heard, and they are focusing in and zoning in on the royal family and politics in equal measure now.
This is such an impossible, this is what's impossible for the king. If he is seen as discouraging Andrew from testifying, or if Andrew refuses to speak, then the narrative shifts immediately. It becomes about obstruction, about secrecy, about whether the palace had something to hide. People will start asking if there was a cover-up, whether fair or not. The optics should, the optics are very damaging. Silence in this case looks like complicity. So the king is trapped between two disastrous options: encourage Andrew to testify and brace for humiliation, or keep him quiet and risk appearing as though the monarchy is protecting one of its own at the expense of accountability. Personally, I don't find Andrew credible. We've had this conversation. I think his past interviews have demonstrated that. I do not trust him as a narrator of events. But I also understand why the public wants him to speak. People want transparency. They want answers. They want to see whether there is accountability at the highest level. But this is a no-win scenario for King Charles, and I genuinely do not envy him. Whatever decision is made, the damage will not be minor. The only question now is which kind of damage the monarchy believes it can survive.
Two questions. Does the monarchy survive this?
It does, because I think people do believe in Prince William and Catherine. I think that they want that future. And that's not to discourage King Charles, but I do think that there's more faith, hope, and love when it comes to Prince William and his young family.
Can you see a scenario then, the million-dollar question, where because in his heart he suddenly realises that he's in an impossible position, maybe not of his own making, as sovereign, that the only way to save the institution he believes in 1,000,000% is to abdicate and pass the throne to his son William?
For history's sake, I wonder if he would say, I'm sick, and that's why I'm doing it, so he doesn't bow out because of such a vulgar and disgusting case and scenario.
It's a really interesting answer. I hadn't thought about that. And finally, it almost sickens me to the stomach to be telling you this. Sarah Ferguson has been in the UAE and, according to her friends, is plotting an astonishing comeback. She says, I need to get back to work because I'm skinned.
Did this not just make you laugh? I mean, when Fergie says she wants to hire a PR firm, which is what she says to her friends, I've got to hire a PR firm. I've got to get back to work because I need money. I think people need to understand what that could actually entail. This is not calling up a publicist to book a morning show appearance. This is not hiring someone to refresh your Instagram grid. If your name is circling in the same orbit as Jeffrey Epstein, you are in full-scale crisis territory. Real crisis management at that level involves 24/7 monitoring, rapid response teams, coordinated legal strategies. I mean, the cost is unreal. They would build war rooms, JK. They would have staff analyzing around the clock to prepare for new document drops, testimony leaks, nasty interviews about her. That does not cost a few $1,000s. That starts at a few $100,000 a month. A serious crisis retainer could run $250,000 to $750,000 per month in the early phase alone.
And more of that, and I get that. And overall, here's the other thing. Are you completely and utterly deluded, you stupid woman? You have done harm. It's over. Disappear. Have some dignity and start talking about the victims of this instead of yourself.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm more literal. To me, I'm sitting back thinking, she says she needs money to work, but what capital does she have to fund this comeback? The bank of Jeffrey Epstein is closed to Sarah Ferguson. The irony is brutal. But you're right. I mean, from a behavior standpoint, she shouldn't be plotting her comeback. She should be mourning the destruction that this person and her relationship with this person has done to so many people, not just her ex-husband, but the victims and everyone involved. Jeffrey Epstein, who could have ever imagined that you might be losing a prime minister? Andrew has lost his entire lifestyle. I mean, who could have predicted it? It's unbelievable.
It is completely unbelievable and won't go away. Oh, God, it goes on again. Overnight, Andrew is being probed by criminal prosecutors over the Epstein scandal. You might have read or seen the Attorney General, Bondi, being attacked by Democratic senators in America going, why haven't you prosecuted the ex-Prince Andrew? No message from Trump on this. This is not going anywhere. I mean, this story continues to dominate. It's on the front of the Sun as well, about how the Queen, Philip and Charles loaned him $12 million to pay off Giuffre. Hasn't paid back a penny.
I mean, that is the hardest headline for me to digest this morning. Learning that King Charles loaned, is a silly word to use, Andrew money to settle this claim from Virginia is deeply troubling, especially based on the conversations we've had over the last week, where I've been defending him relentlessly. At this point, it's very difficult to argue that the king was completely unaware of Andrew's activities, or to maintain that he isn't at all connected to what's going on based on this new information. Even if the intention was to help a family member, facilitating a payoff to, there's no other way to translate it other than to silence an alleged victim. It's not a great look, and it raises real questions about judgment, accountability, and the optics of protecting a relative at the expense of transparency and justice.
It's interesting. I couldn't agree more. I read that this morning and my jaw dropped because, of course, in the last few days when you and I and Andrew Loney have talked about this, people have started to say, well, what the hell did the Queen think the money was for? We know it was her favourite son. Does some of the blame sadly lie with her? Turns out that Philip and Charles were part of this. I don't know why you'd loan 12 million quid to a bloke who's skint. And it is absolutely right to say that now our now king is up to his eyes in it, because there is every reason for people to say you provided money to pay off a victim who'd been sexually abused, trafficked, whatever you want to call it, by the world's most vilest paedophile, and your brother used that money to try and stave off probing prosecution or whatever. And I go back, and I'll keep going back to this. I don't think the royal family has ever been mired in such a position. I think the king is in real trouble over this. I really do.
I think you're right, unfortunately. And I mean, I will say, I talked to Tom Bower yesterday, who wrote Rebel Prince, and Tom Bower is, as you know, heavily involved in writing about the British royal family. And he agreed with me that Charles loathed Andrew growing up, that he probably wouldn't know what his agenda looked like. They didn't have a lot in common. They didn't speak very often voluntarily. But here we have tangible proof that, I mean, nobody hands over such a significant amount of money without knowing why. I mean, I'm sure when there was a strategy session going on, the king, Prince Charles at the time, said specifically, why do you need this sum of money? And it was explained to him, and he handed it over. And, as we sit back and think along those lines and we paint that picture in our heads, it thoroughly disappoints us.
I couldn't agree more. And we had a conversation, I started this on Wednesday, and the traction online was extraordinary. I will absolutely nail my colours to the mast now, and I am a royalist. I think the king might well find himself in a position where the only way to save his precious monarchy is to step aside and abdicate. And you said something yesterday that almost everybody went, God, I hadn't thought of that. And you said, and I'll repeat it today, that you felt there was a good chance that he might well use his illness to step aside as he's mired on this, which would give William and Kate the chance, who weren't, of course, to start with a clean slate. That, constitutionally, when I look back to 1937 and Wallis Simpson, that is absolutely huge if that happens. Huge.
But do we really think that he would do it? He's waited his entire life for this job. He was impatiently waited his entire life for this job. And I feel like it means the entire world to him. And I guess, to go back to what you said to me earlier in the week, or maybe it was even last week, I think I need to hear from him. I think I need to hear from him. I think that might change my heart. But right now, I'm very uncomfortable and almost, to be honest with you, embarrassed that I've spent the last few weeks defending him specifically because, I have egg on my face today.
I think there's many, and I'd include you and I on this massively, who are die-hard royalists who quite rightly, I think, have grown up and believed in the system. And I've understood that he wants to streamline it. But I'm like you. You just said, I'm not sure if he'd do it because he's spent his life growing up knowing this was his destiny. I would hope in his heart that the longevity or even the chance for the monarchy to survive, and I think it's that serious, will be based in his head and he'll know it's the right decision. I'm getting to the point where this is so murky. I mean, overnight, the other thing, Andrew, quite interesting, is going to be probed by criminal prosecutors. I've said it until I'm blue in the face this week. If Peter Mandelson traded secrets with Epstein, he will go to jail. If the ex-Duke of York did the same as a trade envoy, and I don't think lukewarm comments like, we'll talk to the police from the palace, he should face exactly the same charges and the same fate. Because the British public and the public across the world, they've moved on from that entitlement. And that's the big problem the royal family have. And if they hide him or they pretend this isn't going to happen, I don't know, as a royalist, what the hell will come next. Genuinely mean that.
Well, I am smiling at you because I don't know if you've seen the Mandelson emails between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter when Fergie gets caught in the cash for access scandal. But Mandelson specifically says in an email to Jeffrey Epstein that if Andrew had been elected to anything, he'd have to resign, adding that Ferguson seems so desperate about the cash for access. And the two of them, Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, are actually strategizing how to help Sarah Ferguson get out of this scandal, saying that maybe she should admit she has, and there is no proof of this. I think that they're just, strategizing. Epstein says maybe she should say she has medication abuse problems and she needs to go into rehab. Wow. They're just, it's constant scheming. It's constant covering up for each other, to your point. And, we want accountability. These people are in leadership roles. These people are supposed to be held to higher standards, and their behavior is vulgar. Their behavior is embarrassing, and it's not a reflection of who we are. And these are people, elected officials, and even royalty that are supposed to represent us.
I couldn't agree more. And I think for both of us, there's real frustration, there's real anger. I just want to ask you two things. And I ask you every day as this story unfolds. Do you think the king will abdicate over this?
I don't think that Keir Starmer will. I don't think that the king will. I think that they are very stubborn and that their egos would not let them, if I'm being honest with you.
Well, I think the people across the world might demand it. And more than anything, let me ask you this, and so grateful for you hanging on this morning. Do you think the ex-Duke of York will end up behind prison bars? Because I am increasingly beginning to believe he will.
I think that that's more likely than seeing a resignation from either one of those men.
This whole debacle that is engulfing the royal family shows absolutely no sign of going anywhere. Today, on the front of the Sun newspaper, a royal exclusive that simply shouts out what I think could literally lead to major change. Credit, Cad Andrew. The Queen, Philip and Charles loaned Andy 12 million to pay off Virginia Giuffre, and he hasn't paid back a penny. But Andrew Loney, the point is this: King Charles is now completely up to his neck in it, isn't he?
Yes, he is. I think, we need to see how he behaves in the next few days. But he's claiming he's going to cooperate with the police. But I know that he, in fact, is telling protection officers not to talk to anyone. So it's quite the opposite of what he's saying in public. And I do worry that this is all just performative. It's all sort of smoke and mirrors, and that there's no real commitment to being honest about how much the royal family knew about Andrew and what they did about it. This is a problem that they've known about for years. and they've tried to sort of brush it off the carpet. And I'm slightly concerned that they're at the sort of crossroads now. Do they actually deal with this, or do they continue to sort of stick their head in the sand?
I don't think the British people, I'm afraid, and I'm a royalist, will allow them to stick their head in the sand. For me, when I woke up and I read this, you and I, Kinsey as well, have been questioning over the last couple of weeks not the legacy of a woman we all adore, but, you know, the Queen, 12 million's 12 million. This was on her. But this morning's exclusive, Andrew says, Philip also no longer with us, King Charles was part of that money. You do not loan that unless you ask what that's for. I completely agree with you. You don't loan 12 million quid unless you ask what it's for, even if you are the future king. I honestly believe he's going to have to abdicate. I genuinely do.
Well, I mean, he certainly knew about it. You know, the fact is that there was surveillance of Andrew, there could have been PPO reports. So he's been aware of the problem, and I just don't understand why he hasn't dealt with it earlier.
Criminal prosecutors overnight admitting that they're looking at Andrew leaks. I meant to ask you this yesterday. I believe Mandelson will go down for what looks like trading secrets whilst he was a cabinet minister. The vultures seem to be circling around Andrew. Last night, a Democratic senator attacked the Attorney General Pam Bondi and said, why haven't you started? It might seem that it's all on him, but I can't see him getting out of this.
Well, I mean, exactly. If they investigate Mandelson, they have to investigate Andrew. I think a simple thing could be that he actually has to address a parliamentary committee. He doesn't have to go and talk to the Senate, but he could certainly be compelled to give evidence here. And I'm not sure why that hasn't happened. And indeed, Sarah Ferguson should be asked to give evidence. I mean, she was party to this. She was often staying at Epstein's homes. There are more numbers for her in Epstein's black book than his. So I don't know why she's got off scot-free so far.
She apparently overnight, we've discovered, asked Epstein for bankruptcy advice whilst he was in jail for child trafficking. That's what the emails suggest.
Yes, no, I mean, they're very close to Epstein. They didn't really care what he'd been doing as long as he was bailing them out. But I do think there's some big questions about Sarah Ferguson and her abuse of her charities. So I think there's a lot more still to be discovered about these two.
It's interesting talking to you on a daily basis because as the country becomes more and more open-mouthed and shocked, you're like this calm sort of voice because, of course, you've been saying this, Andrew, and a couple of people asked me to ask you this today. When you first made these allegations, I said yesterday you were pilloried. What sort of pressure was brought on you?
I mean, things were cancelled. There was briefing against me. I had death threats, a whole series of things. Stories were spread that I was a paedophile myself. I mean, people didn't want to believe it.
Is it with a heavy heart now that you're being proven right?
Yes, well, I mean, I think, you know, I was shocked when I discovered that the Queen had protected Andrew. You know, I don't want an abdication. I want the monarchy to survive. I want it to be strong. But I do think that they don't seem to have realised how serious this is and what a difficult position they're now in.
How would you, if you were advising King Charles, how would you tell him he can save the monarchy? What should he do?
Well, he needs to clean up the stables. He needs to actually say exactly what happened, how much they knew, what they did, and say that, you know, we will never allow this to happen before. We're going to be much more transparent in all our dealings. We're going to have a royal register. We want to be not part of the freedom of we want the exemptions on the Freedom of Information Act removed. We want proper parliamentary scrutiny, and we will tell you that we will pay our capital gains and our inheritance tax, and we will try and set an example rather than have our noses in the trough.
And presumably, I mean, Kinsey made a good point. She said, you know, he might refuse to abdicate because he spent 70 years waiting for this moment. But I would hope that if it does engulf him, that he cares enough about the monarchy to sweep that stable clean, as you said, and let William and Kate, who you said yesterday aren't implicated in this, they can start afresh, right?
Absolutely. I think there can be a completely clean broom. if they were to come in. They're not associated with it at all. But I think, clearly Charles has been trying to hide this problem for a long time rather than deal with it. And I'm afraid the chickens have come home to roost.
You genuinely think our king has been hiding the Andrew problem?
Absolutely. I mean, I know it's the case. I mean, they had surveillance reports on Andrew. There were PPOs reporting. He knew exactly what was going on. And they just thought they could get away with it if the public didn't know. And I think that's why they now need to come clean about it and get some trust back, because at the moment the British public don't trust them.
And I think that's the point. There's always been many in this country who have seen the royal family along the lines of they're entitled. If they don't come clean with this, they will be rightly accused of using that entitlement, their position, whatever, to avoid, and you said it brilliantly, if Mandelson is being investigated, then the ex-Prince Andrew needs to be investigated. They can't be seen to be treated differently, can they, Andrew?
No, absolutely. I mean, and I've been saying this for a long time. No one is above the law, including members of the royal family. And I think, if Charles really does want to cooperate with the police, then he does need to give the police the internal correspondence. They need to be fully aware of exactly what the royal family knew and did. And they need to deliver him up to justice. They can't protect him any longer.
Really appreciate it. I know your camera was broken. We only did it on the phone this morning, but they love everything about you, and we appreciate you being on again. Andrew Loney, live and exclusive on the phone there to Talk Breakfast, telling you in his own words that, look at the front page of The Sun, credit card. We thought it was the Queen who lent the Duke of York 12 million to pay off Virginia Giuffre. A Sun investigation this morning discovering that Philip, no longer with us, and Prince Charles knew about the money, were part of the loan. A penny hasn't been paid back, which is leading people, whether you're a monarchist or not, to say quite rightly this morning, so if you knew about that, Charles, you've known the depth of the depravity that your brother is accused of. You are up to your neck in it, and many are saying the only way out is for an abdication. That's for people to decide.